first one I'm going to taste today is the Lacrima Chardonnay from Monterey. So we'll give that a try first. This the first thing I'm smelling is oak. It's not over-pronounced, it's just a lovely hint of toastiness and vanilla. Lots of ripe fruit coming out as well, lots of sort of green apple and melon. The acidity is really noticeable on this. That comes from that lovely cool climate. There's a lovely purity of fruit there as well. There's nothing sort of over-extracted or, you know, sunshine in the glass here. It's got lovely ripeness, but it's not overripe. The oak's not overdone either. It's got a lovely creamy complexity. They also practice batonnage, which is the practice of stirring the lees in the barrel to give it that sort of creamy complexity as well, while the wine's still maturing in barrel before it's filtered off and bottled. This is a really good seafood wine, but something slightly richer like lobster, scallops. This would work really well with that old-fashioned dish which I love, coquille Saint-Jacques, which is scallops in a sort of creamy, cheesy sauce. It balances really well with the richness of the wine. Moving south from Monterey, in the Bay Area, we have the Central Coast. As we head towards Los Angeles, you would expect the climate to get warmer, and indeed it does, but most of the wineries are in proximity to the sea, and the Pacific tempers the climate to a large degree, which keeps it still quite cool. Some of the vineyards further south are actually cooler than those in the north. Also, being the other side of the San Andreas Fault, the soils here are quite different from those around the San Francisco area. There's much more maritime subsoil, sort of calcareous deposits, which give the soil a very different character, and a lot of the Central Coast wines are thought to have much more richness and a certain blousy voluptuousness almost to them. The first area we come to is St. Luis Obispo, and the more famous sub-region within this is Paso Robles, which has got some really interesting wines coming out of it. The first area we come to is St. Luis Obispo, which encompasses the more famous Paso Robles AVA, which is vying for Napa for the crown of best quality region. And it's certainly getting there. I don't think it's quite there yet, but some of the producers are making some really interesting wines. Law, Tablas Creek, among others, are proof of the potential that is in this area. Santa Barbara is also an area that's justly famous for its wines, possibly more famous now because of the film Sideways, which was filmed there. It was another historical area first planted by missionaries, but again, most of the area since Prohibition has been replanted with the more classic varieties, Cabernet, Chardonnay, Pinot, and they make some really good wines from this. There's a lot of bulk production here as well. It's a big area. Names such as Gallo and Paul Masson, which, if you remember, those sort of big jug wines with massive screw tops they used to get back in the day from California. Those were some of the massive producers that started in this area. The Santa Maria AVA is often referred to as California's answer to the Côte d'Or, and obviously some really good Chardonnays and Pinots are produced from here. There's also some really excellent Syrah that's made in a very sort of Northern Rhone style. I hate to keep sort of referring back to France all the time in this talk, but the vineyards are modelled so very much on and influenced by the French style that you can't help but refer back to Northern Rhone and Alsace. It's very much the model on which so many of the wineries were based. This also encompasses the Santa Ynez sub-region, which has always been a bit of a tourist hotspot, but also makes some really good Cabernet blends. Again, some Syrah, white Grenache, and some really nice Sauvignon Blanc. So a bit more diversity here than the usual Cabernet Chardonnay. They're very much, again, in a distinctively Burgundian style. They go for that sort of balance of sort of perfume rather than richness. The next wine we're trying is the Lockwood Pinot Noir, which sources grapes from all over the Central Coast, so it's a good representative sample of a wine from this area. It's medium in colour, as Pinot Noir tends to be. It doesn't have the real sort of lightness of some Pinot Noirs from Burgundy, but nor does it have the sort of depth of colour of some from, for example, Central Otago in New Zealand. Lovely Pinot nose, sort of crushed raspberries, red currants, a little hint of spice, not too much. really refreshing, cleansing acidity. Again, to emphasise the relative coolness of this area. People always think of California as a sunshine state, but the wine areas are actually quite cool compared to, you know, many of the Central Valley areas where a lot of the bulk wines produced, which has given California, even to this day, a reputation at the cheaper end of just producing sort of big, blousy Chardonnays and fruit bomb Cabernets. This is a really well balanced wine. Would be really good with charcuterie, but you could drink it on its own. Just a really nice example of a Pinot Noir from this area. Heading back up to the east of San Francisco, we've got the Delta area, where a lot of wine is produced, the Sierra Foothills, and slightly higher up again, Lodi. Now, the Sierra Foothills and Lodi still have a lot of old vines, Zinfandel, that we've mentioned before, but a lot of it's concentrated around here, particularly in Lodi. There's also some Barbera and Sangiovese planted here. Some of it's new plantings, but a lot of it is old vine as well. There's some really nice examples. Quite rare to find because there's not a lot of it about. It's not just the rarity, it's that old vines actually produce quite a lot less. Vines sort of 80 to 100 years old produce about a quarter of the amount of fruit of a 10 to 20 year old vine, but what they produce is so much better and concentrated and rich, as we'll see when we come on to try the last wine. As I mentioned before, Zinfandel has been found to be exactly the same grape as Italy's Primitivo. It doesn't taste exactly the same because vinification methods are different, the climate's different, the soil's different. There's lots of different factors. Also, given the age of the vines, there's very little Primitivo in Italy that is the same sort of age as some of these vines here. Italy actually grubbed up a lot of its Primitivo back in the day. So a lot of the plantings are quite new. I think it was an EU vineyard grubbing up scheme where farmers were paid to grub up the vineyards and plant what they thought at the time were better quality varieties like Sangiovese, but actually Primitivo, like Zinfandel, can make some fantastic wine. So this Bogle Zinfandel is from old vines. I think they're about 60 to 80, so they're not the oldest in the area, but then again, if they were, we'd be looking at a much more expensive wine. This is a really good example of what it is. Much of the fruit is sourced from Lodi, but they get their grapes from lots of different areas in the Sierra Foothills. You can immediately smell the concentration and actually the perfume on the wine. This is a lovely fruit character, lovely sort of blueberry, mulberry, crushed strawberry smell. Lovely acidity, it's the first thing. And it's a big wine, there's a lot there. There's tannins, there's loads of fruit, but none of it's jammy, it's not over extracted. It all comes from the grape. None of this is from sort of over ripeness. Really lovely food wine. This is perfect Sunday lunch fare with roast pork or roast beef, and it's really a wine for sharing. A short talk like this really can't do full justice, obviously, to such a big and diverse area as California. It really is a whistle-stop tour, but I hope it's whetted your appetite to explore more of this really interesting wine area. See you next time.